I spoke to two fourth-generation ranchers from completely different backgrounds who call Douglas home. Both share their lived experiences from the mid-'80s, early '90s to now on how the ever-evolving immigration policies have changed the way life is on their land. But one thing holds true for them both. Immigration reform needs to be done now, and it must be more than a political talking point. 16,000 acres of land, stretching up to 10 miles wide, right up to the border wall. John Ladd's family ranch has been running since 1896.
It's a wonderful life. We raise beef cattle. That's what I've always wanted to do.
Growing up here, John remembers it being quiet. At the time, he says the political climate regarding immigration was not seen as controversial.
We've sponsored 3 guys to be citizens. We had them work on the ranch, and we always had a few people coming back and forth to want to work, and we'd hire them.
John says the norm in the 80s was to hire undocumented migrants for cheap labor through the Bracero program.
We had one guy that worked for us for 6 years, but he was from El Salvador, and he'd work for us 6 months and go home, and he'd walk.
It was during that time, John says, numbers of people crossing began to rise from 20 to 30 people a month to 200 and 300 a month to now 200 to 300 people a day, and has been faced with death multiple times.
We've had 14 dead bodies on the ranch. Now you tell me about that. When somebody is coming through the ranch and dies, that is a game changer.
For John, the political climate has only created tensions between people that don't share the same views.
If you had rancher support on anti-illegal immigration, then that was supposedly a plus originally, back in the early 90s. And then now it's evolved into, if a politician comes and talks to us about illegal immigration, then we're racist and bigot.
About 30 miles away from John's ranch is Richard Jr., a Mexican-American from Douglas. Richard's family ranch has been here for over 40 years, 1 mile away from the border wall.
Late 80s, early 90s, it was open borders. It was well known immigrants, undocumented immigrants were going to be coming through town.
He says his experience with undocumented migrants was different then than what it is today.
We were always taught to help them out. My parents, my mom and dad would teach us to, we always had extra bread, extra bologna. We'd make them a bologna sandwich, give them some chips, some water.
He says the politics from then to now has shifted the way ranchers along the border provide help to people crossing.
Back in the 80s, I was actually, recently I saw Ronald Reagan's farewell address. And he's talking about America, being a beacon of freedom, and immigrants is what makes America great. So coming from a Republican in those times, if that's the rhetoric you're hearing, then you're going to have open arms.
Richard says when the recession hit in 2007, he noticed a shift in dialogue around immigration.
The words aliens start to come out, right? The murderers, the rapists.
It's that dialogue that Richard says has led us to where we are today. He says politicians that come through Douglas are only instilling fear and a rhetoric that he says is not true.
What I don't see are drug cartels coming through here, coyotes coming through here. The individuals that come through here are just trying to get to the next spot.
Both ranchers believe in having border security and having some kind of immigration reform. But until reform happens, Richard says infrastructure will not make a difference.
Without a path, they're going to keep doing what they need to do, right? That's you put yourself in their situation. For them to make the decisions they're making, with immigration reform, at least we bring some kind of organization to it.
As for John, he says the border wall will not stop people from crossing 100%, but helps in deterring people. He says over the years, many people he knows have left their ranches to move into the city to avoid what's happening on the border. But for him, this is his home.
I'm not leaving, and number two, what else am I going to do? I like it here. My boys like it here.
John leased his property to the federal government to build the border wall, but that's come to a halt since President Biden stopped construction last month. As for Richard, he would like a seat at the table with Governor Doug Ducey. He says Ducey needs to hear from all sides who've lived along the border. Carmen, Valencia, KOD News 13.